talking about number 8, the African underdevelopment and the development of Europe. That's the period of the enslavement process, Walter Rodney's thesis. Then number 9, the African influence in the making of the Americas. That's the thesis by Ivan van Sertima, the pre-Columbian presence of Africans, as well as the post-Columbian presence. And number 10, the African factors in the development of the modern world. Wherever you look at our history, it's an extraordinary history. Even in enslavement, no other people have the history as we have. The struggle for liberty and freedom and justice is around our peoples. It's not around the Thomas Jeffersons, the George Washingtons, the Patrick Henrys. Patrick Henry may have said, give me liberty or give me death. But it was our people who actually lived that. It was our people who risked their lives to fight their way out of enslavement. It's our people that took up arms to revolt in slavery. It was our people who joined the revolutionary struggle and fought on both sides of the American Revolutionary War for the principle of freedom. It's our people who, when they were finally asked to participate in the Civil War, fought to the tune of 500,000 black people participating in the Civil War. Half of that number official Union and Army Navy troops. And this 500,000 black folks replaced the 500,000 to 1 million white folks that deserted the war cause because they could not take it no more. But our people knew that the mission that they had was to free themselves of enslavement and free 4 million other Africans. And in the process, we did not disunite America. We unified America. We saved America and freed African peoples. The story of our struggle, even in enslavement, is one of the greatest stories ever told. And that is why, as a result of the enormity of this struggle for freedom, justice, and equality, a Frenchman called Edward René Lefleur de la Boulaye in 1865, because he was a principled Frenchman, because he was a partner of Victor Hugo, because he had such principledness that they sent a medal to John Brown's widow when she died, because he was a French political science professor and wrote a 3-volume history on the United States, he was able to say in 1865 that we need to create a symbol of liberty. But the most important thing about this Frenchman, Edward René Lefleur de la Boulaye, was that he was the head of the French Anti-Slave Society. And do you think in 1865, the French head of the Anti-Slave Society, in one great moment in human history, like no others, when an enslaved people fought, freed themselves, freed 4 million of their brothers and sisters, and saved this nation, do you think that this Frenchman was thinking about immigration? He was thinking about African liberation. And that's why he came up with the concept of the Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty doesn't have a damn thing to do with immigrants. It has to do with African liberation. It is not about immigration. It's about African liberation. And you've got to understand that. But in order to understand that, you have to have the knowledge and information. You cannot be pussyfooting around. You need the study groups. You need to tap into these documents and information. You have to have a sense of history, a chronology, and see the sweep of history. You have to link things together in a systemic analysis. And then you can move forward. And that's what they're afraid of. But the last formulation I want to leave you is that we have to do it within the context of family. We have to see each other as family units and each other as extended family units. Then we have to deal with African socialization, because that's the name of it. Kemet becomes important to us because it will help us restructure an African socialization. African socialization means that when we take people like Harriet Tubman, we take people like Marcus Garvey, take people like Nat Turner, take people like Frederick Douglass, we have to begin to structure a socialization around them. That you don't just deal with them as role models. That's just one element. Role models deal with actions. And Harriet Tubman, for example, was an extraordinary role model because she fought her way out of enslavement. And so she followed and lived what Patrick Henry supposedly said. She believed in give me liberty or give me death. Patrick Henry did not believe in it. He was talking about it. Harriet Tubman, if she did nothing else but fight her way out of enslavement like hundreds of thousands of other people, she stands as a heroine in anybody's history. But something happened to Harriet. Harriet tapped into a spiritual dimension of who and what we are. And Harriet Tubman not only became a role model, she became a mind model. Something happened in the growth of Harriet. Something happened in her development. Something happened when she developed a mother wit, a toughness which allowed her to believe that she had the power and strength of mind to beat the hound dogs and the slave catchers and go back into enslavement again and again and pull our people out. You have to see Harriet Tubman as a role model and a mind model. You can't just leave her there as a role model. But then, even more than that, something happened to Harriet. She tapped into this African core spiritual values, and she became a spirit model. A spirit model is someone who has a mission. And Harriet stands as an enormous role model and mind model, just going back into enslavement again and again, but she never stopped. She went back again and again and again and again and again and again and again, pulling out hundreds of her people. She stands as a spirit model. Something happened to Harriet. She made her connection with the African Holy Ghost, that she felt she was beyond human power. She was in a God context. You've got to have this understanding, African people. They cannot teach you. Beulah Green and Mrs. Greenberg can't teach this in the classroom. You have to teach this in the home. This has to be taught at Rose. This has to be taught in our clubs. The strength of our people. She stands above the Lincolns and the Jeffersons and the Washingtons because of what she did, and she just symbolizes in her person hundreds of thousands of us. She symbolizes my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother, and yours. That's why we have to teach our truth. We cannot go through this world thinking that we were enslaved peoples with nothing contributing to the human development. We brought forth humanity. We brought forth culture and civilization. We brought forth that even in the worst of times, you have the ability to reconstitute yourself into a godliness like Harriet Tubman and restructure a socialization for yourself. So we've got to teach it in the context of families. You can't have a celebration of Martin Luther King like you just had and leave him on the steps of the Washington Lincoln Memorial talking about a dream. He grew beyond the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. And when you see him, you have to see him in a family context. When you see Martin, you got to see Martin Jr., you got to see Martin Sr., who was a minister. When you see Martin Sr., you have to see him next to him is his wife, Martin's mother. When you see Martin's mother, you got to see Martin's mother's father, who was a minister. When you see Martin Luther King, you have to see 3 generations of Africans struggling for African spiritual development. You cannot see him standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. You have to see him in his family context. And then you have to see him in the tradition of Malcolm X. You have to see him in the tradition of Marcus Garvey. You have to see him in the tradition of Harriet Tubman. You can't just make him a national hero in America so he's white eyes, so he's acceptable to black folks. While he was here, he was the Malcolm X of his time. He was the Leonard Jeffries of his time. He was the person that J. Edgar Hoover said was the worst criminal in America. Not the communists, not the mafia, but Martin Luther King was considered by the leading law enforcement officer in America as the worst criminal in America. Why? Because he knew what this truth was, and he was acting on it, and he was moving our people to it. That's what we got to teach in our classes. So it's not about anti-Semitism, it's about anti-Kemetism. And just let me leave you with these pictures as I quickly run through this, because this is where it's at. And this is why they've been coming at us. And this is why they've been trying to isolate us. But this is why they're losing. This is the image of the Pharaoh Zoser. It was Zoser, his queen.